Villains are characters who reside in almost every story ever told. They exist to fulfill their own ambitions, even if it is detrimental to society. And as these villains go on to accomplish their ambitions, knowing their actions will have consequences for not just them themselves, but the world, these villains then start to embody the term evil. And in the world of both fiction and non-fiction, villains are by no means scarce, but there is one single villain who I think takes the term evil to a completely new level. A character who might just be the most evil villain to ever exist. Don Quixote Doflamingo, otherwise known as the Heavenly Demon. You might be asking, well, hey, what did this man do to become just so terrifyingly evil? Well, here are just a small portion of the crimes he committed. Genocide, mass murder, torture, mutilation, piracy, slavery, human trafficking. The list just goes on and on. It might genuinely be impossible to list all the crimes he's committed because he's committed just about everything under the sun. Even as a baby, this man was straight up villainous. He was born directly into godhood as a celestial dragon, a descendant of the founders of the world government. From the time he was born, he was a part of the highest social class in the world. As a child, he had everything: wealth, fame, power, and even slaves. There was nothing he couldn't get. Every single impulsive desire he had was served to him on a golden platter. But what went wrong? How did this kid go on to become known as the Heavenly Demon? Well, it goes all the way back to his childhood. Doflamingo wasn't just a spoiled kid from a wealthy family, but a kid who had the entirety of the Royal Navy at his fingertips. But one day, life as he knew it came crashing down when his parents moved his family down from Marie-Joie to live amongst normal people, renouncing their titles as celestial dragons in the process. Doflamingo was suddenly placed inside an environment where he didn't always get what he wanted, which angered him greatly, as he couldn't comprehend why, as he viewed himself as a god amongst ordinary people. To make matters worse, the ordinary people hated the celestial dragons, for obvious reasons, and once they found out that a family of them had moved down from Marie-Joie, they attacked Doflamingo and his family brutally. But instead of trying to de-escalate the situation, he vowed to kill them all, as he still saw himself as a god amongst these people. He believed his own delusions so much that he unlocked Conqueror's Hockey at the age of 8. And this is the moment that would change his story forever. After a while of living in poverty, his mother would pass from an illness, making the entire situation much more traumatic, and Doflamingo lost it, crashed out if you will. At the young age of 8, Doflamingo murdered his own father in cold blood for completely and utterly destroying his family, despite his intentions of trying to lead his family into a life of peace and tranquility away from the vile people in Marie-Joie. With no more parental figures and nowhere else to go, Doflamingo tried bringing his own father's head back to Marie-Joie in an attempt to once again return to his place amongst the world nobles, but they rejected his proposal. And if murdering his father and bringing his head to Marie-Joie at the young age of 8 isn't the textbook definition of evil, I'm not sure what is, but it just gets much worse from here. Now you might be saying, well, what is it exactly that differentiates Doflamingo from other villains? Well, a lot of villains are broken people who went through extremely traumatic experiences in the past and now want to make the world a better place by drastically changing the world to their liking, completely disregarding everyone's opinions and lives. These villains are of course evil, but underneath all of that, they still want to make the world a better place, even if their methods are just totally wrong. This is the case with a lot of villains, but certainly not the case with Doflamingo, as the only thing this man cares about is seeing the world burn and the complete destruction of the world nobles. It's honestly terrifying when you think about it. There isn't a single thing this man wouldn't do in order to fulfill his delusions. Like, come on, we're talking about a guy who straight up murdered his own father point blank in front of his brother, and then a few years later followed it up with the same brother because he ended up joining the Marines. Well, there's a bit more to it than that, but the point still stands. It's very hard to say that this villain is more evil than that one, and so on. You could argue that villains like Griffith, Sukuna and Dio are on the same level of villainy, but I'm like 100% sure if Doflamingo possessed the same level of power that they had in his respective world, the crimes against humanity he would commit would be off the charts. What separates Doflamingo from a lot of other villains is the fact that he really had to work in order to build his empire and reputation. Sure, he unlocked the will of the Supreme King at 8 and was then gifted a devil fruit, but the power system and the general, world of One Piece is just so large that he can't do as he pleases, as there are so many other people out there that would beat this man black and blue. For example, Doflamingo couldn't just rock up to Marie Joie and start murdering celestial dragons, because he doesn't stand a chance against one admiral, let alone the entirety of the Holy Knights, the Gorosei and Imu. And Doflamingo knows this. For example, back on Punk Hazard, he was about to just up and murder Captain Smoker, but then a single Navy Admiral Aokiji arrived and completely put him in his place. Doflamingo very much operated from the shadows. To him, it was a game of how much evil shit against humanity can he commit without having to confront a stronger adversary. And even with this restriction placed upon him, the amount of crimes against humanity he still managed to get away with is astonishing. He managed to become the leader of the entire black market under the alias Joker. If there's a reason why he's known as the Heavenly Demon, I'm sure this is it. He partnered with one of the most vile characters in the show, Caesar Clown, to create artificial devil fruits called Smile Fruits that only have a 50% chance of working, and if they don't, the user then develops a condition where they can't stop smiling or laughing at anything. And he developed these fruits to sell to another arguably as evil character, Kaido, King of the Beasts and an Emperor of the Sea, for a profit. And mind you, he kidnapped an entire race of dwarfs and used them as slaves to create these smile fruits. I am by no means whatsoever trying to justify what this man did. I'm just really trying to bring it into perspective just how wicked this man is. And at this point you're probably thinking, okay, I understand he's evil, but it just still keeps getting worse from here. Doflamingo became the king of Dressrosa, an entire country, and you're probably thinking, how on earth did a man known as the Heavenly Demon get control of an entire country? And whatever the conclusion you're coming to about how he possibly made this happen, I promise you it's 10 times worse. Doflamingo just out of nowhere appeared of the King of Dressrosa's bedroom at like 3 AM and then stared at him dead in the eye and said, if you don't give me 10 billion berries by tomorrow morning, I'll burn your country to the ground. And of course, Riku panicked at first, but then decided there was no other way if he wanted to avoid a war. He gathered his soldiers and asked them to collect all of the citizens' money without informing the citizens of the situation. And once all the money was collected, Doflamingo then took the money and used his devil fruit to force the king and his soldiers to start mass murdering the civilians, whilst he sat and watched them. And after some time passed, he swoops in and puts an end to the chaos himself, passing himself off as the hero. Like, you gotta be a different type of villain to do something like this. And that's what makes Doflamingo's character just so interesting, because any normal villain who wanted to take over a country would probably just brute force their way. But if Doflamingo tried to just brute force his way into a country, a Navy Admiral would appear the next morning and put an end to him. And he knew this, so he concocted this straight up evil plan to make himself look like the good guy, as Dressrosa's king starts mass murdering his own people against his will. And you're probably asking, well, wouldn't the world government show up after an event like this anyway? Well, probably, but not in this case, as Doflamingo is a warlord of the sea, meaning he has a pardon from the world government letting him act as a pirate, under the condition that he will come to the world government's aid against the 4 emperors if they decide to make a move. And how did he get this role? Not by an official genuine decision, of course, but by using his knowledge as a former celestial dragon to blackmail the world government. And even after all of this, murdering his family, becoming the plug for the entire world when it comes to anything illegal, creating artificial devil fruits, other miscellaneous crimes he committed as a pirate, blackmailing the world government, and brutally taking over a country, it still just gets worse. As when he takes control of the country, he ends up using his companion's devil fruit, which turns people into toys and completely gets rid of any memories of that person beforehand, to start turning random citizens of his own country into toys, which he then uses as slaves to power his empire. and he gets away with this for years, and he would have never gotten caught if the main character Luffy didn't pull up and put a stop to this. And of course Luffy does, but barely. We get this entire arc where Luffy and Trafalgar Law and the rest of the Straw Hats go from Punk Hazard, where they put an end to his smile production, and then they go on to Dressrosa, where they just start uncovering crime after crime. And when they finally get down to business and the main fight between Luffy and Doflamingo begins, the Straw Hats manage to turn everyone who was a toy back into a human, completely exposing Doflamingo. And again, this is why his character is so interesting, because he ends up using his wits to commit these crimes without bringing them to light, because he physically can't stand up to the people who would confront him about his crimes. And we see an example of this again after he's been exposed in Dressrosa. The first thing that he does is create a birdcage around the entire country that would eventually eliminate every single person who lives there, so that there will be no witnesses. But eventually his luck runs out and he was defeated by Luffy and then sent straight to hell, level 6 of the most notorious prison in the world, Impel Down, where they didn't even allow him to move in his own cell. It might be my own personal bias, as Doflamingo is definitely my favourite villain ever, but I just think that there's no other villain out there who comes close to the level of evil. That is the Heavenly Demon. Sure, there are ruthless villains out there who might appear even worse, but it's the fact that he's the outcome of what happens when you put a genuinely evil mind into a character who can't physically carry out all of his ambitions because of the sheer scale of the power system in One Piece, which in turn forces Doflamingo to focus on deception and cunning to still carry out all of these acts without bringing any attention to them so that he can survive. I made a video going over the complete story of Doflamingo a lot more in depth, so if you're interested, I'll leave a link somewhere on the screen.